What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So with all the discussion around Nintendo's next-gen device honing in on the main system itself, that being the Switch 2, I guess, we've had some new information get out there that now has people thinking about the other part of the equation, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a game that's leaked out a bit early that has me wondering what exactly is going on with Prince of Persia. And then the PlayStation Portal, everyone's favorite handheld device, had some unfortunate news around homebrew and hacking that means we're going to be waiting a bit longer to open this guy up. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early and ad-free. If you would like to learn more about that and support the channel, you can click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with an event that's been announced for the typical E3 time over the summer, and that's from Ubisoft, which we can see this posted up on their official X account, saying, "Join us live from Los Angeles for Ubisoft Forward on June 10th for updates and upcoming releases." Now, a few things we can expect to see here. Assassin's Creed Red, I figure that's going to be a big focus for them, as Assassin's Creed obviously is their big flagship franchise now, and this would be Assassin's Creed heading out to Japan, so that would be really, really interesting, at least for me, and I think many others. Star Wars Outlaw, I guess that should be coming out later on this year. So again, another one I feel like they're going to highlight. And then Beyond Good and Evil, the HD remaster thing that they're doing, I assume that would be there too. But Ubisoft, I know it's not necessarily the most exciting event that people look forward to, but there is also one other game that could be there, and that's what we'll take a look at later on the show. Also, there's a really cool indie game that's been making the rounds online, which you can see here. This posted up over on X from Johan Vinit, who says, "I'm happy to reveal my new tiny game, Castaway." Retweets much appreciated. Hey, you can check the trailer out here for it. And look, you guys know I really enjoy my top-down Zelda-like games. And this, while they are even saying up front that it's kind of a smaller game, I think they mentioned there's like 3 bosses that you'll be tackling here. I don't know, it's just the retro-inspired art style, again, the top-down 2D aesthetic. And this is being made in Game Maker, which people ask MVG all the time on these different podcasts, where should I start if I want to try developing a game? Just take a shot at it. And he's recently said multiple times, Game Maker is actually a pretty good route. It's free. You can make 2D games, like even a top-down title in this way. And they have full tutorials on how to get started with it. It being free is a way for you to kind of just jump in and try it. And if you come up with something that you think is commercially viable, they have a path for that too. So it's pretty cool just to see, again, how much more accessible it's become to be able to create a game if you have an idea like Castaway, which again, I'm going to be keeping an eye on. There's no release date on it, just says coming soon, but to me, this is something I'll be firing up on the Steam Deck OLED day one. Oh, and it's looking more and more likely like Hollow Knight Silksong is right around the corner for some kind of announcement. This was noticed by Gamatsu, you can see posted up, saying that Hollow Knight Silksong was rated in Korea on February 20th. You can search Hollow Knight within the proper date range here, but I mean, like, they screen capped it here for, yeah, I think we're getting close to Hollow Knight Silksong being revealed in terms of like a release date, the whole thing. I don't think it's getting shadow dropped, nothing like that. I've seen people speculate on that idea. I just think Hollow Knight Silksong has grown to a level to where they want some marketing leading up to release. They're gonna get the game, or they're getting the Game Pass bag from Microsoft, but then they'll put it on PlayStation and Nintendo Switch, PC, and it'll do really well there also. So I think this is something they're going to build up towards, but now it's really to the point of, okay, where are they going to make it official? Is it going to be a Nintendo Direct? Would it be in a State of Play? Will Microsoft have it at their showcase that they've already talked about in June? I mean, there's a lot coming up, so there's going to be plenty of places to make this reveal. We'll just have to keep our eyes open for it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a new patent that's now been published and made public from Nintendo that was making the rounds because it does feel like a Nintendo idea, a way to kind of get around cable management for your Switch, or maybe your Switch 2. Now, this being a patent that's been made public doesn't necessarily mean that Nintendo is going to use this exact method, but I think it kind of shows us their thought process right now as to maybe some things they can clean up in the next iteration of their dock. Like we of course have been discussing the idea of the Switch 2 in the sense that, okay, how much more powerful will it be? Will it use NVIDIA DLSS? Will it be HDR implementation? Will it be doing 4K? But the dock is a whole other side of that equation when it comes to different I/O, obviously for the ports, HDMI, USB, how are they going to position that? But with this patent, it sort of shows a method of being able to flip things around. Literally. Now, this popped up on Reddit, which Nintendo Life picked up, but then we also have access to the patent itself. However, we can see some of the images here that were posted up by Nintendo Life. And the idea with this is, if you look at the back of your dock on your Switch, it's just set up static. So the cables come out one side. You can, of course, on the newer one that came with the OLED, pull the entire back off if you would like, or leave it up and it'll kind of essentially push the cables out one side in that cutout. In this case, they have cutouts on both sides, and the back, as Nintendo describes in this patent, will swivel around depending on the position you would like it to be in. And they also point out vents and other mechanisms they have set up to get air through all of them, all the stuff they would have in there. And then they also show how they would route a cable through and still be manageable while you're rotating basically the little brick with I/O ports around. So essentially, you'd be able to pick which way you want the cables to come out, whether it's on the right or the left. And I guess technically they could work out how you'd be able to maybe have it go out the back as well, but this is just sort of a bid to kind of hide the cables depending on your setup, of course, so you don't have to, in some cases, have to run it out one side and then flip it back around anyway and have your cables all like kind of folded up a bit. But this is, again, this isn't like a massive thing in terms of, okay, this is obviously Switch 2 stuff here, but I do think it's interesting just to see how Nintendo works to solve some of these problems. Maybe with a current Switch now, sure, but would not shock me if this is something that was in the next Switch in terms of the dock, where you can choose where you want the cables to go. The other interesting aspect to this is that the two USB ports that would normally be on the side of the dock, they've put on the opposite side of that block that turns around. So technically you'd also have USB ports facing the other cutout, and all of this is a way just kind of hide the cables. You won't even have them coming off of the front. I don't know. Something interesting to consider there, as we mostly talk about the core system. What about the dock that it'll be sitting in? People have wondered if we ever get to the point where it's wirelessly connected. I don't think so, not yet. But still, what other features could Nintendo pack into that dock that's not just a supplemental compute device, as people have speculated on, basically another GPU? What other quality of life features could they build into that dock? Let me know down in the comments. Next up, let's talk about a new Prince of Persia game that appears to have leaked out early, which is interesting because we just had a very good 2D Metroidvania style Prince of Persia with Lost Crown. We know there's a Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake that's somewhere out there. I think, believe it or not, we're still a couple of years off from that one coming out. But now we have a whole other one that's releasing, and the developer may surprise you a bit, as we can see this posted up over on Insider Gaming, who did have the exclusive, saying Dead Cells developer to release a new Prince of Persia game in Steam Early Access. So this is very interesting. I was not expecting this one. This is from developer Evil Empire then. It's a new roguelite that will receive constant free updates and evolve over time based on community feedback. So kind of similar then just to Dead Cells in general and what they obviously know how to do with that sort of genre there, and then having what they call the Rogue Prince of Persia. That's the title for it. The art direction inspiration is heavily from Franco-Belgian comics. I didn't recognize this just from the name there myself personally, but looking it up, you can see, I'm sure Evan can pull a few and drop them here so you kind of get an idea as to what they're going for here. Definitely have a very unique look compared to any other Prince of Persia game, so that's kind of cool. And then it's targeting an early access release on Steam later this year, which we just talked about the Ubisoft Forward event. This seems like something else that would be announced there. Now, the early access thing, kind of weird because it is Ubisoft, of course, that would be publishing it alongside of Evil Empire who'd be developing it, but I guess just the way they would have it set up with Steam and try to get feedback from the community, and then being very upfront and transparent that it is early access, I don't necessarily mind it as much, because when they eventually do get to the final product and the full launch, I assume then it would just go to all platforms that are available at that time. But this is really cool to see just Prince of Persia getting a big focus now from Ubisoft. When you hear at times, some of these companies say, man, we really want to revive this franchise or we'll look into it. But when I start seeing them actually putting in money and effort and just releasing titles, good titles too, like Lost Crown, very, very good game. This, with the Dead Cells developer behind it, could also be a good game. And now we see them essentially rebooting the Sands of Time remake because they want it to be good, or at least to a certain level. It does feel like Ubisoft is doubling down and really putting that focus in on making Prince of Persia like one of their top franchises, at least building it up or attempting to get it there. So I like what's happening here with Ubisoft now, trying to treat Prince of Persia as more of a premium brand for them, and we'll see if they can pull it off with this and then eventually the Sands of Time remake. Next up, let's talk about the PlayStation Portal and, well, some unfortunate news, especially if you were hoping to be able to hack the system and do things like load a PSP emulator on it. If you remember, that's something that we even talked about here, where it seemed anyway that it had been opened up to at least allow that emulator to run. Although it probably wasn't going to run very well initially, but, development over time, maybe we somehow get it to where it's at an acceptable level of performance. Well, it appears Sony has already patched it out completely, and that's because they had some help. We can see this posted up over on X with Andy Nguyen, who was there originally, who discussed this and showed it off, that it was able to run on the PlayStation Portal, saying, "We responsibly reported the issues to PlayStation. Bugs are fixed on 2.06. Well, you kind of figure how this went over in the replies. People didn't really like this one, and I mean, I get it. The idea that they had figured it out, and you would hope that they would have shared that information with the community before Sony had a chance to patch this one out. Yeah, that one, again, I get it. In this case, though, I assume that there was a bounty bug program in place and that they at least got some sort of payout for it, which we've talked about HackerOne and just different sites that people can go through who do work to figure out what security exploits there are and then present them to these companies and get paid out, generally a sizable, we'll say, bounty. In this case, though, here's the problem with the PlayStation Portal. If you buy one now and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to leave it and eventually it'll be hacked and will be good and I'll be on the old firmware, here's the issue. When you turn your PlayStation Portal on to use it, because it is reliant on Wi-Fi just to get started with the setup, Sony makes you update it to the latest firmware. So that's kind of why people were thinking, hey, if we get in early before Sony can patch this, then maybe we'll turn off updates and stuff. No, unfortunate. So yeah, that doesn't look like, at least for this one, we'll be able to. Sony already patching this thing out in this 2.06 update. We'll have to see if down the road there's a way that they can open it up, as they will share it eventually, if they can open it up so that auto updating, or just that updating in general, can be turned off even if you're on the latest firmware. So yeah, not great news necessarily, but I do understand it. If you have a bounty in front of you, that you'd probably take it. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about that Final Fantasy IX remake that was originally leaked in that NVIDIA GeForce leak. And I've told people many times, don't go against that leak because it has consistently been right for what feels like years now. Well, after some recent comments from Yoshi P, people are thinking, okay, yeah, something is definitely going on here soon, or we'll say soon-ish, but we also have other information getting out there from one account that's been gaining quite a bit of notoriety recently, and we can see this posted up over on X. This from Silk Knight says, several people inquire about Final Fantasy IX and what type of game it could be. From what I know, the main idea is a remake as faithful as possible to the original, and definitely much more modest than Final Fantasy VII in terms of budget. And look, the 7 remake trilogy that it's become now is probably quite expensive, so it could still be like I don't want to say an incredibly expensive game, but like a fairly expensive game and still be well below and more modest than Final Fantasy VII in terms of budget, scope, and just we'll just say going off the rails. I finished Rebirth, and if they just stay in the ballpark of 9, they'll be on the rails compared to what 7's turned into. But we can see this posted up. This is over on Gamatsu, who noted some of the information from Dawn Trail, Final Fantasy XIV, with that launching July 2nd. However, Yoshi P noted something here, saying you may have noticed a lot of Final Fantasy IX references here, but the reason is a secret. I wonder why there would be Final Fantasy IX references in there with Final Fantasy XIV. Well, I feel like Final Fantasy IX, unfortunately, based on some of the information that's gotten out there over the last year or so, it kind of got pushed a bit in development, and it's not necessarily coming out when they were hoping it would. So I still think we're a ways off from 9 Remake, but I am curious how people would feel about Square if they did go off the rails with 9, or if they would prefer for it to stick as close to the source material across the board. I mean, in terms of combat, gameplay, characters, the events that happen in the game, because I kind of feel like this one is still going to just be traditional turn-based. I don't think they're going to try to shake it up like they've done with 7 and have a more action-oriented combat system. I think you're going to get 9 just better looking, and you just run through the game again, which isn't necessarily a bad thing again, but based on what I've seen with 7, I do get a little worried when Square talks about putting a bunch of money into something and reimagining it, which is one of the reasons I thought about 6 when that was going around. I'm like, do people really want Square to go all out with 6, or would they prefer maybe a Final Fantasy IX remake strategy where they just kind of dress it up a bit and put it out there? But I also posed that question to you guys, so we'll take a look at the poll, which we can see. I asked, how would you like Square to approach a Final Fantasy IX remake? 18% say I want a complete reimagining of the game. Let's just off the rails the whole deal, I guess. But hey, Square definitely has it in them. Just go grab Nomura and his team and you'll be off to the races. 51% say I want the same story and events, but with different combat and visuals. Okay, so I do think there are many people out there who, whether it's the younger generation or just people who are kind of tired of static turn-based, that they don't mind the idea of it becoming more of an action-oriented kind of game. And then 31% say I want it to be a one-to-one remake with better visuals. Again, I wouldn't mind that either. In fact, I think there are more people who should play Final Fantasy IX. It almost, to me, it's a lot of people who have played through it will say it is the best Final Fantasy game. That's it. You want a good Final Fantasy game that's not necessarily a 2D game. Like, people look at 6, but like at least 9 is on that level where it has a bit more presentation to it. But like 9 itself, for many of the Final Fantasy, we'll say, enthusiasts, they'll look at that and say that's the one. That's the best one. And I do think that's a game that more people, especially with the newer generation, should play. But it's also on the PS1 and it's harder to get into. So I think it'd be cool if they did at least bring it up, current platforms, dress it up, sure, but maybe tinkered a bit with the combat to modernize it slightly. I don't know. Let me know what you think down below. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Delta, who says, as soon as KOTOR Remake gets a blurb about being reimagined for modern audiences, already middling expectations will crater. I expected at this point. Oh yeah, I think they're changing that up completely. I don't think it's going to be the same combat, same style, where essentially it was like what old BioWare, right? So you go in, you have kind of the menu set up, you tell the people what to do, and you just kind of watch them act it out. I'm thinking it's going to go the route of it being more action-based. Like, you control your character, you have your lightsaber, that sort of thing, and you also will throw commands to some of your allies and kind of point them in the right direction as to what they're doing. Or maybe they'll have their own little gambit system kind of set up where you're like, okay, if health falls below this much, you then heal. It's getting a complete revamp. I just don't think that gameplay, that structure, is something that's easy to market for them, and I don't know if it's going to appeal to enough people based on how expensive this thing is probably going to be. But I guess we'll find out probably in a couple of years. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Nintendo's patent kind of fixing up cable management for that dock? But what other features would you like to see for Nintendo's next generation dock for the Switch? And then also, what about a new Prince of Persia game from the Dead Cells developer? Do you like Ubisoft really pushing right now with the Prince of Persia franchise? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.